Hey, it's Judith. Today I'm going to show you how I made this dress using McCall's pattern number 7774. And I actually used View D. And this was I would say this was like a break-in pattern for me. I haven't sewn with a commercial pattern in some time. It's been several years actually. So I thought that was a pretty user-friendly pattern to, my break-in pattern to back to using patterns. So, and this is what the dress came out, how it came out. And I'll try this on later so you can see how that looks on me. And I'll let you know that I did review Anita by Designs sew along. It was a very good, very detailed sew along. So I'll put her information in my description box. And with that, I'll just give a brief overview of what I think of the pattern. I like the pattern, and I think it was fairly easy. But there was one thing I did do. I went back and I adjusted the pattern after making the dress, and I actually have my fabric laid out. I'm going to make another dress. So this is the thing. I made a mock. I made maybe 3 mock-ups. I was so concerned about the bodice fitting, in the bust line area, that I forgot to focus on the armhole. So it dipped down a little too much. So I came back and I increased the armhole by 1 inch and used my French curve to smooth that out. That's the front bodice, and here's the back bodice. So I did the same, those should be even. And I actually just used tissue paper to do that. So that is my main takeaway. And again, I think this was a fairly easy pattern to use. And with that, I will get into my tutorial. Thanks. Okay, I'm starting out by marking off 12 inches off the bottom of my skirt. This is view D, and I'm going to cut those 12 inches off. Okay, here I'm extending my pocket to give it more stability when I attach it to the skirt. So I'm simply using a curved ruler and tissue paper, and I'm going to tape that. Once I finish, I'll cut that off and tape it and just extend that pattern to adjust it. So to give it, again, to give it more stability when I attach it to the skirt. Okay, I have my skirt pattern piece laid out on my fabric. Again, this is view D, so the pattern calls to cut 4. So I'm going to cut 2, then I'll flip the pattern, then cut the other 2 pieces out. Okay, this is just to show you that I have all my pieces cut out all my bodice pieces because this piece has a liner. So 4 cuts for the front, 4 cuts for the back, and as well for the pocket. So just made all those cuts again, make the 2 cuts, flip it, and make the other cut so you have the opposing pieces. So that's everything, and I'll be ready for the next step. Okay, here I'm serging all my pocket pieces, and I'll also serge all my skirt pieces because the material I'm using has a tendency to fray. Okay, I have my bodice pieces laid out. I've already pinned the front center. This is where I'm going to stitch, and there's a stay stitch mark. That's where the V is going to go in the front of the dress, and then I'll come back up and do a basting stitch. Okay, here I'm showing you that I have my front seam completed on my bodice, and now I'm going to prep to make the darts on the front of the bodice. And I've already marked it. You can't really see it there, but that's my dart. Okay, this is just to give you a close-up so you can see what my dart actually looks like. I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine and stitch there to complete the dart. Okay, this is just to show you that I've completed my darts for the front bodice pieces. That's for the liner piece and the outer piece bodice. And now I'll move on to work on the skirt. So I've already pinned the center front of the skirt. I'll stitch there and I'll now pin the back center of the skirt and take it over to the sewing machine. Okay, I'm showing here I've already pinned my side seams and I've added the pocket. So I'm just going to stitch along the side seams and I pinned the front and the back pocket on and I'll stop and to leave the opening on the side and then come back up and finish up to the top and then come around the edge of that pocket and stitch. Okay, here I'm showing you that I'm getting ready to do the side seams on my bodice pieces, the liner piece and the outer piece, and then I'll be ready to attach it to the skirt. Okay, here I'm just opening up the back center seam of the skirt, so this is where I will insert the zipper. Okay, here I'm doing the same for the bodice. I'm going to open up the back center seam as well. This is where the zipper will go. Okay, I'm just showing you here where I created my basting stitches or my gathering stitches. This is where I'm going to gather this fabric here to attach the bodice to the skirt. Okay, I have my bodice pinned to my skirt. My seams are gathered. I gathered the threads on the skirt and my bodice is flipped down. Right sides are facing together. Okay, this is just to show you that I already have my zipper on one side, stitched on one side, and I already pinned the second side. I pinned it right on that edge, and I'm using a clip just to keep it even so it won't move when I start to stitch the other side. So I clipped the middle right there, but I pinned the other side of the zipper so when I stitch it again, it won't move, and just to keep that zipper even. Okay, this is where I want to show you how I start my zipper. I just start simply by turning the flywheel just to get the zipper started, just to get it started, and then I'll use my foot presser. But first, I just use the flywheel to turn it and get it going, and then I'll use the foot presser. Now I have my zipper installed, and what I'll do next is I'll flip the dress inside out and I'll close off that small enclosure that's at the bottom of the zipper right there. Okay, I've stitched the front collar and now what's left, I'll stitch the back collar and the underarm of the dress. Okay, I now have my bodice liner and the outer part of the bodice. They're attached at the top. So now I'm just going to trim off the excess seam allowance and then I'll get ready to attach the bodice at the bottom. Okay, now I'm ready to do my understitching, and I'm flipping that up so I can see that's the liner, and I'm going to stitch right on the side, right there on that seam right there. The seam is going towards the liner, and we're going to stitch on that side for the understitching in these curved areas of the dress bodice. Okay, I have my understitching completed. Now I'm going to open up the shoulder right there on the front and the back on both sides, and then we'll stitch those together. Okay, I've opened out the facing of that shoulder and I placed right sides together, and now I'm going to stitch right on that edge where I've pinned it. Okay, here I'm just clipping off the excess of that shoulder seam allowance. Okay, almost done with the shoulder. So we're going to tuck that side seam in and come back to this later. But before we tuck it in, we need to flip that shoulder seam allowance towards the back like that. And then we'll be ready to move on to the next step. Now the next step is going to require hand stitching. We're going to hand stitch the bodice to the side of that zipper right on that seam allowance, and then we'll come down to the waistline and hand stitch all the way around the circumference of the skirt. Here I'm showing you my technique of how I stitch, and I pick up like the very edge of the fabric with the needle. It's time consuming, but yeah, you want to just pick up, you want to be very precise and just pick up the very edge of the fabric and pull the needle through and just continue that process. Okay, I've completed my hand stitching. The bodice is completely attached to the rest of the skirt. And so now it's a dress. And I'm going to finish off my shoulders using hem tape. I'm not going to hand stitch it like the instructions provide, but I'm just going to use this hem tape. Okay, this is the technique that I use to close my shoulder. The instructions call to hand stitching. I just didn't want to do that. So I'm going to use hem tape. I cut my hem tape in tiny little strips, and I'll use my tweezers to insert it, and then I give it a good press. So I'll continue this process until I close that shoulder. Okay, my dress is pretty much completed here. I've closed the shoulder, and now I'm going to focus on the hem. I'm going to make a hem that's 5/8 of an inch. I'll fold that under, give it a press, pin it, and take it over to the sewing machine. Okay, here I am in the finished dress. I really like how it came out, and I added a camisole underneath to compensate for that dip on the side that I will correct in my next dress. But if you got anything out of this video and you enjoyed anything out of it, please consider subscribing to my channel and giving this video a like. Thanks again for watching. Bye.